Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode. This is Take It to the Hizzy Fantasy Football, TITTH number 7. Today we're going to be talking about Week 2 matchups, who are starting, who are benching, some flex spot opportunities, while sprinkling in some game total overs and unders. Let's just jump right into it here. I'm not going to touch on Thursday night too much. Like what I saw out of the receivers for the Panthers. Obviously, CMC was put in check. Cam Newton put in check, was pretty inaccurate. Not a ton of space for him to make plays on the field while he was getting pressured a lot, and he didn't really have the ability to escape the pocket. Was throwing a lot of stuff over the top of guys, just evading pressure, from the defensive line. So not overly impressed with the Panthers. The Bucs did enough just to get it done. Really started to eat up some clock at the end of the game with Peyton Barber. Playing some keep away there towards the end. That was nice to see. Rojo was again locked up. #free Rojo. Rojo was put in check, didn't get fed the ball enough, was outsnapped by Agun Bawali and Peyton Barber alike. So his value, shooting back down, not good to see if you're a shareholder of him. And then, Mike Evans and the Chris Godwin, kind of back and forth. Obviously, Godwin's had a couple of big weeks here. That's probably a theme that we're going to see going forward. Mike Evans has been kind of put in check, whether he's being used as a decoy. Winston's not looking his way. Obviously, week 1, we didn't get a ton of parity. There was a lot of mistakes, a lot of penalties. They cleaned up a lot of that in week 2. Still had a fair amount of penalties, but at the same time, Winston and their offense looked a little bit more comfortable, despite there being a lot of pressure from the defensive line from the Panthers. So wanted to touch on it a little bit. Don't want to deep dive too much there. Getting into the actual week 2, what we have ahead of us here for this Sunday and Monday night. Starting out, we're looking at the Cardinals at the Ravens. Going to be a pretty exciting game with a couple of young quarterbacks coming off pretty positive fantasy weeks in Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, of course, having the perfect quarterback rating. Kyler got off to a rough start. He started the first 3 quarters like 9 for 25, 70 yards, and an interception. After that, he really settled into his own. His final game total here, I have it right here, 29 for 54, 308, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. So you like the fourth quarter and overtime rally there, but are we going to see that consistency all game up against a pretty strong Ravens defense, especially that front group that they have there? I think that if the Ravens do score a lot, that the Cardinals will, be pushing the ball down the field. I don't think that they're going to go away. Obviously, they didn't do much in the first 3 quarters of their first game, at home. Now that they're going on the road, the stakes are going to be a little bit higher, a little bit of a better challenge from the Ravens defense. I do see them including, DJ in there a lot. David Johnson, he had 18 carries last week for 82 yards, adding in 6 catches for 55 yards and a touchdown. I think he's going to get a lot of work because I think that the airspace is going to be pretty tight. Starting out for the air raid offense. Speaking of the air raid for the receivers, you're obviously starting Larry Fitzgerald this week. That's without doubt. Christian Kirk and Keyshawn Johnson both had a ton of targets. Christian Kirk had 12 targets, only 4 catches. Keyshawn Johnson, 10 targets, 5 catches. You didn't see the efficiency there early on, but they really started to settle into their own in that fourth quarter and overtime. And then you have Demir Bird there. He worked in as well, 7 targets, 4 catches, 42 yards. I do think that the emergence of Michael Crabtree will kind of eat into the Keyshawn Johnson and Demir Bird workload. So Kirk was at 93% snap count percentage behind Larry Fitzgerald's 96. Keyshawn Johnson came in at 76 and Bird at 88%. So they were used quite a bit. But those were the main 4 that were used. Isabella had 8%, and Isabella, have to say his name like that. Sorry, really fun. But I do think Michael Crabtree will come in, eat some of the workload there, and you could see their snap counts come down some. As we get more weeks into the season where Crabtree is more downloaded on the offense, more familiar with the scheme and the playbook. The Cardinals D is looking pretty abysmal. They let up a ton of yardage last week to Detroit. Total passing yards for Detroit last week were 361, and they also had 116 on the ground. So, they tore up the Cardinals. They're missing their top 2 corners, especially missing Pat Peterson. That's hurting them a lot. So look for that to continue. Not a startable defense this week. I don't think, even the pressure that they can get up front on the Ravens D, should be that expected. If they can put Lamar Jackson into some situations where he's passing the ball a lot, they might be able to get an interception here or there, but I still think that they're going to get carved up quite a bit, so you're not starting them. And then, of course, you're looking for the upside from the Ravens, based off of that poor defense. And I think that we're going to see a high-scoring game flow here potentially. So when you're looking at the Ravens, you're looking at Lamar Jackson coming off that, was it 17 and 18, or 17 or 18 for 20? Yeah, 17 for 20, 324 yards and 5 passing touchdowns. Just ridiculous numbers, video game type of numbers. They looked like they were playing on some all-pro action down there in Miami. Miami didn't look like an SEC team. They looked like an ACC team. I don't really understand it. The whole let's fold now. It's week 1. Let's not care. Let's not have any pride, right? The Dolphins. Got the Patriots coming in there this week. God knows what to expect. But back to the Ravens. Lamar Jackson going to have a big week, I think, again against this Arizona defense. Not looking very strong in the secondary. There should be a lot of opportunities for him to make some downfield plays. We saw that ability in week 1, with Marquise Brown and Willie Snead, taking some bigger plays to the house for touchdowns. So I do see that as a possibility. However, if Arizona is able to bring a lot of pressure in front and run some QB contains and, really push the ends to the outside and limit Lamar Jackson's ability to, make passes to the outside of the flat and then also not be able to evade. I know that he didn't do a ton in the rushing game this past week. He had 3 rushing attempts for 6 yards, but I do believe that if they're able to hold their receivers in check, hey, the next thing you got to do is you got to stop Lamar Jackson from running and taking off. So I do think they'll be able to work that into their defensive game plan this week. But I do see Lamar Jackson, having a pretty solid week. Mark Ingram, and he's a starter. You got to start Lamar Jackson, obviously. Whether it's standalone quarterback league or superflex, you got to start him. Mark Ingram, he was dealing with a shoulder injury earlier in the week, but he has had full practices from Thursday on, so that's good to see. He should have a standard workload. I could see some management in his workload, of course, if they get up in the game, like they did against Miami. So I do still think that Gus Edwards and Justice Hill are live. They're guys that have some live action for this Sunday and could have some potential inclusion into the offense, especially into the red zone. If Ingram's been working his whole way up the field, that's when the backups get in there, is into that red zone when you're resting your top guy. So last week, with the track meet that they started, you had Edwards at 38%, Ingram at 32%, and Hill at 30% snap count percentages. So they all got a bunch of work. Edwards had 17 carries, Hill had 7 carries. So they're going to include them in the game plan. And then you get into the wide receivers, and you have Seth Roberts and Chris Brown that are going to still be working in. They played a fair amount last week, but didn't have, huge numbers. You had Marquise Brown obviously going off for the big 4 catches, 147 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He only played about 14 snaps. He barely played, with the rest of the offense. It was 18% of the total snap count percentage on 14 total plays. Those numbers are ridiculous. I can't imagine that that's going to stay steady for this week, but I do think that they need to use Brown more. They need to make more space available on the open field for the rest of these targets. So I do think that he's a starter if he's good to go. A lot of these guys have been banged up this week. Brown, Andrews, Ingram, all have been getting questionable tags, especially Andrews later this Friday, yesterday, Friday, when he got a questionable tag. But Harbaugh said that he's good to go. He's a guy that had 8 catches for 108 yards and a touchdown last week. So I look for him to have a pretty good week if he could get used. Hurst, 56%, Boyle, 56%, and then Mark Andrews at 42% last week for the snap count percentages. So, I do want to see Andrews on the field a lot more than that, if I want to continue to start him or continue to stream him, because at the end of the day, that availability will produce production. When you're working on these double tight end sets and you have a guy back there like Lamar Jackson who's going to be improvising and extending plays, you want your guys on the field with him. So I see a lot of live starters. Andrews, as long as he's good to go, we don't hear any bad news on Sunday. Marquise Brown, same thing. Willie Snead, I think you can fire up. I think Seth Roberts and Chris Moore are interesting options and maybe some DFS because they're not going to be targeted so much. You only had 1 target for Roberts last week, and then I don't even think you had anything for Chris Moore. No targets for Chris Moore. So those are some guys I think could pop off for a couple of targets and maybe a touchdown. Could be an interesting DFS play, if you're looking for some super low budget players. Ravens defense this week, I think, is a starter. I think they'll bring up enough pressure to get some sack points, maybe an interception here or there. But I do still believe that the Kyler Murray-led Arizona Cardinals is going to push the ball down the field, and I think they still will score, a handful of points here, or a handful of, scores, touchdowns, field goals, and what have you. So give me the 46.5 over for this game. I think that the Cardinals don't go away. If they're down, they're going to be passing a lot, and they're going to be scoring points regardless, because I think the Ravens will hang back too, once they get a sizable lead, take some starters out, get the second string guys in there, get them a little bit more action. And, I think that may lend to the over in the situation where the Cardinals may score a couple of late game touchdowns and they're hitting over that number. Okay, so Chargers at the Lions. Chargers offense will, they're going to focus on the run game with Henry and potentially Mike Williams out. You'll want to follow the Mike Williams storyline going into Sunday if he's playing, if he's going to be limited, if he's completely out. I don't think he's going to be a strong play regardless. He's definitely someone that I'm benching. I think that Justin Jackson and Travis Benjamin are going to benefit, from those guys being out. Henry obviously being out, like 4 to 6 weeks, but he was a bigger target still in the offense. Last week he did have 5 targets. Mike Williams had 3 targets, so you do have to make up some space there. Travis Benjamin did get worked in for 3 targets, but he only had 2 catches for 12 yards. Not much there. Virgil Green will be coming in to replace Hunter Henry, so you can look for some opportunity with him, in some deeper leagues if you just really need a guy that's going to be touchdown dependent. But I think Phillip Rivers is the start this week for the Chargers outside of Eckler and Jackson. Rivers last week went 25 for 34, 333 yards, and 3 touchdowns with one amazing one-handed interception for the Colts. So I look for him to have another strong week up against a Detroit Lions team that did wind up getting carved up at the end of the day. The Cardinals wound up having like 275 passing yards, 112 rushing yards. So Detroit secondary and defense not looking great still. I do see a lot of opportunity for the Chargers there, despite Williams being beat up, despite Henry being out of the lineup. I do look for Allen, Eckler, Jackson, and Rivers to have some big days. I wouldn't be afraid to set up a stack with Rivers, Allen, and Eckler. I think that's a pretty strong play this coming week. Going into the Lions, Matt Stafford had a great week last week. 27 for 45, 385 yards, 3 touchdowns. Even mixed in a couple of rushing attempts for 22 yards. So I like what I saw there. I like the weapons on the offense, especially in the pass catching game. Marvin Jones, Danny Amendola stepped up. Kenny Golladay, of course, is always there. T.J. Hockenson stepped in, had a huge game. 9 targets, 6 catches, 130 yards, and a touchdown. Danny Amendola had 13 targets, 7 catches. So, those back-end guys behind Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay were getting targeted a lot more. I could see a balance of that or something of the same. And, Detroit, really opening up a shootout up against the Chargers, who, made a lot of mistakes on defense at home. The Colts were able to run up 200-plus rushing yards on them and only up 173 passing. But I could see a little bit more of the same this upcoming week. So, look for a little bit more high-scoring game, I think, in Detroit. As far as the splits, you had Hockenson at 73%, Jesse James at 58%. Look for that trend to continue going forward. They were talking about James being the starter all training season, off season, but Hockenson came in, really showed out, played very well. You got Danny Amendola down there at 53% snap count, had a ton of targets on all that work. So, I like him going forward. I think you should be starting him. Marvin Jones is really the big concern for me because I think that you're going to start Kenny Golladay regardless, just kind of based on where you drafted him, his upside being the number 1 guy. He's out there almost every play. His snap count percentage was 98%, Jones 81, Amendola 53, like I mentioned for him. So Jones only having that limited work, that kind of concerns me some. I'd like to see a little bit more out of him just based off of the space that's available on that offense. 4 catches, 56 yards, pretty solid as far as, your per catch yardage on that. But I'd like to see a little bit more out of him just based off of these other guys having, more looks. Hockenson being there, Amendola getting more work. Marvin Jones should be able to contribute at that level as well. So, you could see him coming in and being more of an included weapon this week. Give me the over for this game, 47.5 points. I like it to be a higher scoring game. I think both offenses are going to push the ball, and I think that the Lions will be able to lean on the run game and chew out some clock at home towards the end if they can get a big lead. Like I mentioned, the Chargers letting up a lot of yards in the rush games to the Colts. I think that could be the trend towards the end of the game. But give me the fireworks start, touchdown to start this game. I think it's going to be a high scoring one. Okay, next we have the Colts at the Titans. The Colts coming off a pretty solid performance on the road against the Chargers. Did wind up losing in overtime, but they did force that overtime late in the game. I like what I saw out of them. They had 203 total rushing yards, 173 passing yards. Jacoby Brissett was efficient, 21 for 27, 190 yards, 2 touchdowns, like what I saw there. T.Y. Hilton had a solid performance, 8 for 87, 2 touchdowns. I like his upside this week. He's definitely somebody that you're starting. Some interesting guys here, Paris Campbell, Deion Kane coming in with the Devin Funchess injury. He's going to be out for the year, so that's unfortunate. But look for Deion Kane and Paris Campbell to kind of split snaps behind T.Y. Hilton. There's opportunity for both sides there. Campbell only targeted once last week. Kane targeted twice. Funchess was targeted 5 times. So there is going to be some opportunity opening up there. I do see there being some more opportunity for the tight ends as well, right? Doyle and Ebron, they should get a little bit more work this week. With the Titans, lots to like there. Strong performance from Derrick Henry, a strong performance from Marcus Mariota. I wasn't overly impressed with Mariota, but I do think he is a starter this week up against a Colts defense that was still letting up a lot of air attack up against Rivers. Rivers had like 333 passing yards, so I do like Mariota's upside this week. He's 14 for 24 and 3 touchdowns, but you had the big play to Derrick Henry on the screen, 75-yard catch and run for a touchdown, and then you had some closer, not necessarily full red zone opportunities, but you had some closer opportunities for Delanie Walker, in tight. So I wasn't overly impressed with those touchdowns. They were just kind of something of yesteryear, something we're pretty similar to seeing from years past with Delanie Walker and Marcus Mariota. So, A.J. Brown coming in, 3 catches for 100 yards. That's great. Corey Davis being shut out by Ward, getting stranded on Ward Island from Denzel Ward, top corner for the Browns. I do like him to have a bounce back week this week. I think that he'll have some more usage. Don't quit on him just yet. Of course, you're starting Derrick Henry. You may want to start Dion Lewis in some deeper formats. He did have, 4 targets last week, 3 catches. He is a guy that can come in really at any time and steal a red zone touch for a touchdown or take a couple of big catches for a big chunk play. So, he is a guy to look at, but not necessarily a confirmed flex player. He's just, super deep, if you need to throw a dart on a running back. A.J. Brown, I think he's startable. Adam Humphries, I think he could have a bigger week as well. I do look for Corey Davis and Adam Humphries to kind of bounce back and get used a little bit more. That's pretty much it. I don't see any other deeper plays here. Tajay Sharp did play a good amount, but he only had 2 targets. Didn't have any catches or anything like that. So I do look for those guys, Humphries and Davis, to have a bigger week and a bounce back week. I look for the Titans defense to play well too, but at the same time, the Colts do look like they have a strong rushing game, and they can mix in the pass as well with some solid weapons that they have with Hilton, those tight ends, and those other guys coming in. Give me the over in this game. I think the Colts will do just enough. Give me 45 to 47 total points. Right now, the over-under is at 43.5. I'll take the over in that game for sure. Next, we have the 49ers at the Bengals. Garoppolo looked okay last week. He's still a little bit shaky. You kind of have to tip your hat off to the Buccaneers defense. They've played well the first couple of weeks and shown that they may in fact be the real deal. Sorry, I couldn't spit that out. Goodness, damn Red Bull. But I like the opportunity this week. The Bengals still did lose on the road. They were able to limit the Seahawks quite a bit actually in the passing game, and the running game. Chris Carson did still have a pretty good day for them. But they did limit his yardage. He only wound up having, 15 carries for, 46 yards, added in a little bit more in the rushing game. So I could see Breida and Mostert, getting some solid work in the pass catching game as well, as they might get shut down, coming up the middle of the field. But I do like Mostert and Breida as some sneaky starts this week. Breida is going to be getting a good amount of volume with Tevin Coleman out. Mostert's going to be coming in and cleaning things up for Breida. So I do think that they are both flex starters this week. Garoppolo, I will start in a super flex spot. He did just enough to get the job done last week. He did have that interception, that pick 6, but he did get it together. He did throw the touchdown, 18 for 27, 166 yards. Not overly impressive, but I think that he'll be able to do enough to put on a solid performance at the Bengals and be fantasy relevant this week. Look for a lot of him and George Kittle, mixed in with the running backs. I'm not really sure what to tell you as far as the wide receivers go. Deebo Samuel, Marquise Goodwin, they played a lot but they didn't do a lot with their playing time. So Deebo Samuel only 3 catches, and then Marquise Goodwin only 1 catch for 7 yards. So they didn't really do a lot. They were definitely a disappointment this past Sunday. Dante Pettis only played 3 snaps. He's a huge disappointment. So look for, I suppose, Dante Pettis to maybe get some more playing time. But, Kittle's the safest start right here. I would fade these wide receivers until you get a little bit more information. And, they kind of show their hand a little bit more to us about who's going to be getting the volume, if any wide receivers are actually worth starting there. If it's going to be a complete, volatile situation every week, we may just want to stay away and just, roll with their running backs. Maybe mix in some Garoppolo and Superflex, and then, of course, Kittle an instant starter every time, right? So then we got the Bengals side of the ball. Dalton coming off a really good performance, in Seattle. I think he's going to get leaned on again this week. I don't know if he's going to hit, 50 pass attempts. Last week he went 35 for 51, 418 yards. Holy Dalton, throwing 2 touchdowns. But that was with Giovanni Bernard and Joe Mixon not doing much, right? So Giovanni Bernard, 7 carries, 21 yards. Joe Mixon, 6 carries, 10 yards. Not a lot of work there. And we could see a lot of the same with Mixon, being questionable, being a game time decision. If he is or if he is starting, he's going to be worked in, and his workload's going to be managed some. So I see a lot of Giovanni Bernard this week. I definitely like the stack of Dalton, Bernard, and Boyd. I think Boyd might be a little bit more of a reliable option than going with the John Ross route. I think a lot of people are going to be, running to the John Ross trough this week in DFS, putting in that stack, maybe like I mentioned, but with Ross instead. I'd say go Boyd. They both had over 10 targets. Boyd had 11 targets, 8 catches, 60 yards. Ross obviously went off 7 catches, 12 targets, 158 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He is a more versatile threat for me, but I do kind of see it as a just flash in the pan performance. I think he's going to kind of come back down to earth this week and not go off for those type of numbers again. I do like Eifert and Uzama, CJ Uzama, as a sneaky play in DFS as well. I think one of those guys has an opportunity to come down with a couple touchdowns, if they can get into the red zone consistently, in this matchup against the 49ers. 49ers defense, not super impressive to me, had a pretty good showing up against the Bucs, but I'm not really buying into it. They're going back on the road at the Bengals. So I look for them to, I look for the Bengals to do a lot more passing in this game, like I said, because they're not going to be able to establish the run without Mixon there. Bosa's banged up for the 49ers, so I do see the Bengals having some more opportunities, in a higher scoring game at home. I'll still take the under in this game. I think that the Bengals defense will do enough. They were a pretty sneaky play last week up against Seattle. I think they'll keep Garoppolo in check. Kittle may do some damage, but the rest of the receivers aren't going to show up for him, and the running game might, sprinkle in a touchdown. Give me 1 touchdown for Kittle, 1 to the running backs, whether it's Mostert or Breida, and, a touchdown and an interception for Garoppolo. Over-under is 46 points. I'll take the under in this game. Next, we have Jags at the Texans. I think this is a sneaky game to hit the over. It's laying 43 points right now, but I think that the Jags are going to come in and be, sneaky good this week. Minshew was super efficient when Foles went down this past week. All the receivers scored a touchdown in that game, so I like all the receivers. Of course, I like, or not of course, but I like Minshew, in Superflex. I think you have to like his value in Superflex. If I was in a position to start him, I would in a Superflex position. But at the same time, we have to keep that in check that he is still a rookie and he may still be, coming into his own. The Texans might be able to do some work on him at home, but they didn't really do anything on defense last week. The Rams carved them up. What was it here? The Saints went for 362 passing yards, 148 rushing. So I see a lot of opportunity for the Jags offense. I'm definitely starting Fournette. He's going to be used a lot. And if the Jags can get up early and often, or if they can start scoring early and often, and get up by a couple touchdowns, they can really lean on Fournette to run the game away, eat up the clock, and just play keep away from the Texans. Playing in their building, which I think will be a pretty important asset for them this coming Sunday. I like all the Jacksonville wide receivers. Give me D.D. Westbrook, give me DJ Shark, give me Conley. I'll start all of them in any format. They're definitely higher end flex plays in my opinion, because I do still see the Texans playing very well at home. I can see Minshew hitting the 275, 300 yard mark. The tight ends there, I'm not jumping to start, right? They have O'Shaughnessy and and Swain. Both of them had 4 catches, 32 yards for O'Shaughnessy, 17 yards for Swain. not running to grab any shares of those guys, not looking to start them. I'm pretty sure you can keep them on your bench safely this week. Coming into Houston with these guys, obviously you're starting Watson. You're going to start both the running backs, Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson. They're going to split work and both get a good amount of touches, probably somewhere from 10 to 13 touches for both of them, with Duke Johnson, of course, mixing in more into the passing game. Hopkins is going to have himself a day tied up with Jalen Ramsey, so I do look for Fuller and Stills to have some opportunities behind him. I think that they could have some big days this coming Sunday. Kute is coming back as well, but I'm not trusting him. I'm keeping him on the bench. A.J. Bouye had Sammy Watkins doing whatever he wanted last week, so the Jags may look to attack that assignment again. Or the Texans may look to attack that assignment again, based off of that poor play. So look for, A.J. Bouye to be moving around a lot, if the Texans go ahead and target his side of the field, with Hopkins being tied up with Jalen Ramsey. I feel good about starting Fuller and Stills, like I said. The tight ends aren't really worth owning there. Over-under for this game is 43 points. Let me get the over. Vikings at the Packers. I like the Vikings in this game. I think they could play upset in a game that could actually get to be a little bit more high-scoring. I think that the Packers will do enough at home to score points, score touchdowns, and what have you. But at the same time, the Vikings look really, really good, and I'm looking for them to come in and do some damage against the Packers. The defense for the Packers, maybe looked a little bit inflated playing up against a Bears offense that seemed a little bit lost at times, leaning on their quarterback, Mitch Trubisky, which they should never have done. I think that, the Vikings have a more advantage just talent-wise. Just, the guys that they have are going to create a lot more mismatches on offense and defense. Just jumping back into the scores here, just give me 1 second. Vikings, Minnesota. So Kirk Cousins last week, obviously he had the 9 for 10 game, 98 yards and a touchdown, and he had a rushing touchdown. But we have to see these numbers come up, right? I think the Packers are going to score enough points that they're going to force the Vikings' hand to pass more, to run a little bit less. But I do think that Dalvin Cook is a must-start. Madison, I think, is actually a pretty sneaky play because the Vikings will look to run still, frequently this coming Sunday. But at the same time, they want to manage Cook's workload. So I think Madison's a pretty sneaky play, actually, for like some dual flex leagues. Maybe not putting him in every start as a full running back, but if you have 2 flex spots, I think in some deeper formats, he's a guy you're looking at. I'm starting Diggs this week. You got to start Thielen. Like I said, I think the workload's going to be a little bit stronger with Cousins having to pass more. I don't think that they can lean on that low of a passing number. I am not starting Kyle Rudolph or Irv Smith Jr. Not much action there for the tight ends last week. You still saw the majority of the passing going to Cook, Diggs, and Thielen, which will still lend in a higher volume passing game. Going over to the Packers, I like Aaron Rodgers, but I really don't want to start him. I think that he's a fringe starter this week. I still think that he's going to throw a couple of interceptions in this game. Give me 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns, and maybe a rushing touchdown for Aaron Jones. Sorry, I couldn't spit that out there. Aaron Jones should have a stronger week. He was playing against the Bears defense, so a super high inflated defense there, not allowing a ton of space for the running backs. I think that Aaron Jones will get a little bit more work this week, especially in the pass catching game. I'm definitely starting Devontae Adams. I'm definitely starting MVS. I think that you can go ahead and bench Allison. He didn't get enough work last week, didn't get enough playing time. And then you have Jimmy Graham and Marvin Lewis, who are splitting time on the field, but Jimmy Graham did come up with that lame duck touchdown, just that air ball that was thrown up, and he just kind of randomly came down with it. Kind of used in a safety valve role here and there. So I do think that he's a starter, a low-end tight end starter. If you do have him, or you have another poor option to stream against this week. Over/under for this game, 43 points. I just think it's a little bit too low. I think that we could hit a 50 mark. 47 to 58 total. 47 to 50 total points for the game. Next, we have the Cowboys at the Redskins. Dak was super great last week. Had a great performance. I think that he's a must-start every week going forward. I think that Zeke's going to get used a little bit more. I think Tony Pollard, I think it's safe to go ahead and put him on your bench for now. I don't think that he's going to have enough standalone value each week to be a starter or even ownable. So that's something that you may look to do if you need to pick somebody up, or you just have someone that's super droppable. The wide receivers, you got to be starting all these guys. Randall Cobb, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. You got to start all of them. They had great performances last week. They're going to be passing a lot against the Redskins that are a little bit stronger up front, that can do a little bit more damage in the rushing attack. So I do look for more passing out of Dak this week, but I do think that Zeke will have a healthy stat line. Give me 16 to 18 carries for over 100 yards and a touchdown from him this week. But I still like Dak to go in there, throw a couple touchdowns. Give me 2 or 3 touchdowns for Dak this week, carving him up to maybe Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper, and then maybe mixing in some Jason Witten and some Randall Cobb action. Going over to the Redskins, really like Case Keenum this week. I think that he's a pretty interesting play. He had 3 touchdowns last week, 380 yards, 30 for 44. Was very efficient. He was able to hit his guys, Vernon Davis, Terry McLaurin, and then Trey Quinn. I think they have some interesting pieces there, and they have a pretty unique look. Quinn and McLaurin played a ton. They played over 90% snap count. So I like both of them going forward. You're losing Darius Geis with his knee injury. Adrian Peterson is going to come in and take down that first and second down workload. But I think Chris Thompson's an interesting play as well, just based off of how the offense looked, looking for safe plays, looking for more possession and intermediate pass-catching opportunities. So I think that there's some sneaky plays this week. Jordan Reed's out. You can start Davis. You can start McLaurin. You can start Trey Quinn in some deeper formats. Adrian Peterson if you're really needing a running back. Same thing for Chris Thompson if you really need a running back. I think that these guys are all live this week up against Dallas, who will eventually wind up leaning back a little bit after they maybe get a lead early on. I do still like the Cowboys in this game playing at home. Give me the over 46.5. I think that the Redskins will do just enough to keep the scoring going and hitting that over. Next, we have the Seahawks at the Steelers. Wilson looked pretty sharp last week. Bengals were all over him, but he didn't make a ton of mistakes. He was just Russell Wilson. Didn't throw a ton. He was 14 for 20. Got the yardage here. That's Andy Dalton. Where did he go? All right, so next you got the Seahawks at the Steelers. Russell Wilson had a pretty solid performance, 14 for 20, 196 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 rushing attempts, no love there, only had 8 rushing yards. I see a lot of the same, needing to rush the ball a lot, giving Chris Carson a ton of work, 15 carries, 46 yards for him last week, 6 catches for 35 yards and a touchdown, and added in a rushing touchdown. I see a lot of him this week trying to eat at the Steelers. The Steelers secondary is really bad, but I think that the focus for Seattle is going to be to eat at the clock, control the ball, and just mix in the passing plays when they can, because the Steelers are just really bad in the secondary. They did not perform very well last week against the Steelers up against New England, who didn't do very much in the running game. They only had 99 rushing yards, but I still believe that Seattle will lean on the rushing game early on, and just like I said, pick their spots in the offense in the passing game. You can go ahead and start Metcalf. Lockett was banged up, but he's off the injury report now, so you can start him. He only had 1 target, but it was for a touchdown. He keeps up that per catch high efficiency with that type of methodology. Only getting 1 target, 1 catch, 1 touchdown. But I like Metcalf. He was pretty solid in his first performance last week. What did he mix in here? Oh, got the wrong one pulled up. Metcalf had mixed in. Keeps pulling down the defense. 4 catches, 89 yards. I like that efficiency. I know he had like 6 to 8 targets, but I wasn't sure on his catches. So I like him as a play this week. He's someone I can feel comfortable starting. Lockett comfortable starting, of course. Carson absolutely starting Wilson in all formats. So I like all those guys for the Steelers. Definitely starting Roethlisberger, coming off a loss, coming back home. I think that he'll try to have a strong game. Or at least a bounce back performance, mixing in a lot of quick hitting plays to the running backs, to Samuels and Connor. I think they do need to use Connor more. I think that they need to kind of lean on him a little bit into the rushing game and lean on that clock again, like I mentioned for Seattle, doing that up against the Steelers. Lean on that clock, play keep away, and limit their opportunities to play against you on defense. Juju, he's good to go this week. Had the toe injury, was out early in the week on practice and with an illness, but he's good to go. So you're going to want to fire him up. Not starting James Washington, not starting Dante Moncrief. I think Vance McDonald is a fringe starter this week. He didn't really show up in week 1, and a lot of the targets were passed around to the other receivers. Even with Moncrief not playing well, if he's not playing well, then are not getting the targets, I think they'll distribute the ball to Washington, and he'll have more targets. But I'm not sure, which way that's going to go. So I'm not really buying into the over/under in this game. 47.5 points. I think it's going to be really close. I would stay away from this, but I do think it's going to be under 47.5. That's where I think we're at, but too close of a call for me. I would stay away from this game. It could go either way as a defensive, overhaul for both teams, no scoring, or it could be a complete shootout where both teams are just chucking the ball around because the Steelers are being aggressive, pushing the ball down the field, and then the Seahawks are just coming back up against the really poor secondary for the Steelers. Next, we have Bills at the Giants. I really like Josh Allen in this matchup. The Giants played very poorly last week up against the Dallas Cowboys. So I like Allen this week to mix in with some passing and rushing stats. Look for Devin Singletary to get used more. Look for Gore, hopefully, to get used a little bit less. I'm not sure. He didn't really do much last week, despite getting about 10 carries. I'll pull up the Bills here. But I like Josh Allen. I like Cole Beasley. I like John Brown. Devin Singletary, like I said. I'm not grabbing any of their tight ends. They weren't used very often. Allen still made some mistakes, throwing that pick to C.J. Mosley. That wasn't great. It was just kind of bounced off the arms of Cole Beasley. But I do look for him to have a bounce-back week in the efficiency department. 24 for 37, 254 yards. I think he'll clean that up and give us a better showing up against a pretty poor defense of the Giants. The Buffalo defense, I think, is a pretty strong play this week. I think you definitely need to be streaming them into your lineups. Eli Manning didn't have the greatest performance. Didn't throw an interception, but wasn't very efficient. 30 for 44, 306 yards. Was leaving yards off the field. Throwing balls behind guys on third down. Not very efficient. They actually did bring Dan Jones into that game. He went 3 for 4 for 17 yards. So Sterling Shepard's out. He's in concussion protocol. Going to see a lot of usage for Evan Ingram. He absolutely needs to be in your lineup. Cody Latimer, and Beanie Fowler are interesting plays in DFS. I don't think you necessarily want to start them this week. I don't know which one's going to go off. This Buffalo secondary is still very stiff. They're very good. So I'm not sure. I'm trying to be sneaky and toss one of those guys into my lineup. The over-under for this game is 44.5. Give me the under. I think it's going to be a little bit more low scoring because the Giants are going to push the ball down the field. And once the Bills get ahead, I do believe the Bills are going to win on the road here. Once the Bills get ahead, I think they're just going to not be as aggressive, put away the passing attack and lean more on the run. So give me the Bills on the road. Game total 44.5. Give me the under. All right, so next you got the Patriots at the Dolphins. I like the Patriots in this matchup, obviously, huge favorites. Brady's going to come in and cut up things pretty quickly. I think that he'll have his way with the Dolphins early on, but you might get pulled at halftime for all I know. I really have no idea. Bill Belichick might try to run up the score. He might pull his starters. There's a lot of options here, or really more questions than anything, I should say. But I do see some consistencies. I like Rex Burkhead this week. I like Philip Dorsett this week. Those guys had pretty good weeks in week 1. I think that their usage will be there just because they're guys that will get used regardless if they're ahead or if they're not ahead. The high upside guys, Gordon, Endelman, James White. I have no idea if Antonio Brown is playing. There could be information available this very moment, and I'm just not privy to it, for his playing time. So we'll see what happens there. That's something that you're going to want to follow, if you do own him. Not necessarily a forced start for me. I don't think you have to start AB necessarily because I don't know if his usage is going to be there after only coming in and being with them for a practice. So not really sure what to think there. Patriots defense will be a really strong start. Miami's just bad. they're just bad, and the Patriots defense is just top notch. They're top shelf. I don't see Miami putting up too many points. I really don't even need to get into Miami because I'm not starting any of their players. No Parker, no Williams, no running backs, no tight ends, no quarterback, nothing. I mean, give me the under in this game, 48.5. I think that they're only hitting the under because I do think that the Patriots will check out in the third or fourth quarter, and Miami might put up a touchdown late in the game, but I don't think there's going to be much to see here. I think the Patriots put it away pretty quickly. Give me like a 38-10, 38-12 win at best. Give me the under 48.5. Chiefs going to the Raiders. Obviously, I like the Chiefs in this one. They're going to be big favorites still against the Raiders. But the Raiders did a lot in the passing game last week against the Broncos. They were efficient. They were able to get the ball to Waller and Williams quite a bit. So I look for some consistencies there. I look for Mahomes having to continue to push the ball down the field because it's going to be a back and forth, offensive match here. I really believe that. I think that Carr will do enough to keep the Chiefs, aggressive. Keep the Chiefs from, having to put the starters away. Still use McCoy and Williams a lot. They're going to split carries. I think that Williams is going to get more catches and be used more in the passing game with Hill out, and McCoy will, start to be more of the inclined first and second down guy. I just think that's what's going to wind up happening. I've been, beating the Dame Williams drum all offseason, even before week 1. But that's just the reality of it. Williams didn't do a lot with his rushing attempts, and McCoy did. So, that's just the way that it looks right now on paper going forward. So I do see Williams having still very good value going forward with Hill out. But when Hill comes back eventually, I do think that Williams will kind of, get put in the back seat towards the back end of the season. So he really needs to show up in these coming weeks to solidify his value going forward to make sure that he's still getting used in the game plan. Watkins must start this week, right? You have Hill out, so you have Mecole Hardman and Demarcus Robinson. They're going to be splitting snaps behind Watkins. I like Hardman just a little bit more than Robinson just because he can be used in that gadget type of role that Hill could provide. Mecole Hardman is not Tyreek Hill, so don't expect those types of numbers, but I do think that he is the next guy that I would want over Robinson, just based off of his potential. Kelsey, you're of course starting. He's a must start. He only had 3 catches last week, but I think that he'll find more space and opportunity up against the Raiders defense. Again, I look for a shootout this week in this game. So the defense for KC looked really bad. That's why I like the Raiders in this game as well. I think that their offense will be good, but they're not going to be able to do enough to beat the Chiefs, who have just all the weapons, and of course, the Messiah that is Patrick Mahomes. So Carr and company looked great in week 1, like I mentioned. Williams and Waller looked amazing. Jacobs looked great, getting a ton of usage, over 20 carries. I look for that theme to continue. Try to mix in the run and the pass in this game. I think 53.5. I think it's not high enough. I think that this game it could actually get into the 60s. I think we could see a 34-30 game with the Chiefs just edging out the Raiders. The secondary for KC last week did not look good. They're playing Jacksonville, and they're making Jacksonville look great right now. I'm talking about every one of Jacksonville's wide receivers being a startable option this week because they looked great up against Kansas City, and that's all I have to look at. DJ Shark burning guys deep, Conley burning guys across the middle, Westbrook mixing in. So I see all of these options here, Williams and Waller and Jacobs, just the same. I think that they can all get mixed in and do a lot of damage up against KC. So give me the over for this game, 53.5. I like it. I like the game a lot. Saints at the Rams. Breeze played well in week 1. Did make that really bad interception, but I think that they'll have a strong attack in the rushing game. The Rams let up a fair amount of yards in the rushing game last week to Carolina. So I look for Alvin Kamara to get leaned on. I look for Latavius Murray to get a fair amount of usage. Fire up some Mike Thomas. Fire up some Ted Ginn. And then you have Jared Cook and Traquan Smith there as some kind of fringe guys. Both going to be touchdown dependent this week. I'm not sure if that's something that you're trying to plug into your lineup. I say every week that you're going to want guys that are, just ahead of standalone, or not standalone, but just ahead of touchdown dependent value. The top guys could easily get pulled down, but those guys just ahead of touchdown dependent value, they're good plays every week, kind of like a Ted Ginn. I think you have to plug him in. I think that some weeks you may think that he's touchdown dependent, but I think that he's a guy that's just ahead of that mark that you're going to want to start week in and week out. Give me the Saints defense as well. I think the Rams, while they will play well, the passing game may not be there for them. I think that they're going to cut things up between Kupp, Woods, and Cooks. But I think that the secondary defense for the Saints is very strong. You have Marshawn Lattimore there that's going to be trying to cut into the top target. They may even throw him on Kupp just because of how reliable Kupp is and how much of a safety valve that he's used as. So I think you can actually start the Saints defense this week. I like the Rams offense, but I think that they're going to be able to get some sacks, may get an interception or 2 on Goff. Goff could have a bounce back week. He is playing at home, but the Saints defense is going to come in to look and pressure him early on. If Goff is rolling, you're going to be seeing a lot of quick hitting passes to Woods, Kupp, and Cooks. Obviously, Gurley and Brown are going to split carries. I think that they'll try to lean on Gurley later on in the game. Gurley still had a lot of usage. Brown didn't have a ton of snap count percentage, but Brown was stealing all the touches in the red zone, which was unfortunate for Gurley owners. I think Gurley finds the end zone this week. Give me a touchdown for Gurley, one touchdown for one of those receivers, and an interception or two for Goff. I think that he's going to get held in check again. You're starting the Rams receivers, of course, every one of them. Not starting any of the tight ends there. Give me the under for this game, 51.5. Goff could have a comeback performance, but I like the Saints a little bit more. I think it's going to be pretty close. Not really sure who to call for a win or a loss. The Rams will have the advantage of being at home, but I really like the weapons for the Saints. I think that they're going to be a sneaky play this week. Give me the under for this game, 51.5. Bears at the Broncos. Mitch Trubisky is going to have to take a step forward this week. Did not look good in his week 1 performance, but he was leaned on a ton. Having to throw the ball over 40 times, that's not something that you want. You're going to look for Montgomery to get used more in the offense. You're going to look for Cohen probably still to get used a lot in the passing game, and Mike Davis just to come in there and just mix it up and take touches away from those guys. So I think you probably need to be starting every one of those running backs because any one of them could go off for a big play at any time. I'm only starting Robinson as far as the wide receivers go. Burton, I think, is going to be a game-time decision. Either way, I'm not going to start him. You're, of course, starting the Bears defense. They're top-tier, top-in-class for the defenses, for team defenses. But at the same time, I think the Broncos could be sneaky. Flacco was pretty solid last week, being pretty efficient, not making too many mistakes. He did target Sutton quite a bit. They had a pretty positive connection. You're going to have Lindsey and Royce Freeman splitting up the snaps. I do like Lindsey to have a little bit more upside in the pass-catching game, but I honestly don't see either of these guys getting over 50 yards in the rushing attack. Sanders and Sutton are there. Like I mentioned, Sutton had a strong performance. Sanders was kind of bailed out in a late-game touchdown. So I think actually Deshaun Hamilton's the play here. I'm going to start Sanders and Sutton as well, but I think Hamilton is a sneaky start this week because I think the Bears defense is going to be highlighting those top guys. So I do like Deshaun Hamilton for a touchdown. Throw him in your DFS lineups. I think that the Broncos defense is a sneaky start this week as well. I keep wanting to say sneaky snark. I don't know what a snark is. But he's a sneaky start. They're a sneaky start this week, the Broncos defense. Goodness sakes. I think that they're going to play well up against the Bears. I think that the Bears, they're going to be looking to improve on the running game, and that doesn't really play into their strength or up against the strength for the Broncos D. They have Nick Chubb and Von Miller over there, Bradley Chubb, I'm sorry, and Von Miller over there, and they're going to be trying to run down the alleys against the Bears all day. So give me the under in this game, 40 points. I don't think that there's going to be a ton of scoring. I think that both teams are going to be both team defenses are going to be keeping the offenses in check. I don't think there's going to be a ton of scoring here, so give me the under 40 points. Okay, next we have Eagles at the Falcons. I'm looking for another strong performance out of Carson Wentz this week. Everybody there, Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, Zach Ertz. Give me some Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard maybe. I think all those guys are startable. Not throwing in any Dallas Goedert. I think Darren Sproles may get held in check this week. I'm not sure if they'll use him as much, but if they do, I'm going to regret it because I think he could be a sneaky play too, but just not someone that I'm comfortable plugging into my starting lineup with his age and the upside of Miles Sanders and Jordan Howard. So I'm starting all those guys. I like the Eagles a lot this week. I think they'll have an easier time scoring up against the Falcons. I think the Falcons may disappoint again. The running game did not look good for them last week with Ito Smith and Devontae Freeman splitting carries. Julio Jones obviously held in check. Calvin Ridley wasn't necessarily held in check. He had a touchdown, had a couple of really nice plays, but didn't get a ton of work. So I like both offenses to get rolling early and often, but I do think they'll hit the game total under of 52 points. For the Falcons, I'm starting all the guys there outside of Sanu, and that's pretty much it. Fire up Jones, fire up Hooper, fire up Ridley, fire up Freeman. I guess, I'm not starting Ito Smith. Fire up Matt Ryan. They need a big comeback week. They need to really show that they're still a solid offense, that they can get things done. So I look for them to try and bounce back. Game totals at 52.5. It's just a little too rich for my blood. So give me the under in that game, where I still think there could be a decent amount of scoring. I think that 52.5 is just a little too high. Not starting either defense in this matchup either. No Eagles, no Falcons. I just see a lot of opportunities for both sides to score. But I do like the Eagles on the road against the Falcons. Look for all their weapons to be included. I'm not so high on the running backs, though. I guess I should say that Sanders and Howard are who I'd be the lowest on. They're still kind of fringe flex starters for me because they're going to eat into each other, and there's really just no blueprint for their game plan about how they're going to get used if one's going to be used overwhelmingly over the other. So those would be some fringe guys that I would be questioning tomorrow for starters. Browns at the Jets for Monday Night Football. Oh man, I don't know what to expect for this game. The Browns, look like I don't know what they look like. Not very good is what they look like. Mayfield, ton of penalties last week. Put them in really bad situations with the interceptions. Had 3 interceptions, only 1 touchdown. Nick Chubb was pretty solid. Had 17 carries for over 80 yards. So I do look for them to lean on the run game quite a bit. Landry and OBJ, they should have a fair amount of opportunity. And Njoku should have some solid options as well, with C.J. Mosley being out. So I think he might be able to do some work underneath on some shorter pass catching intermediate routes. OBJ and Landry, you got to start them. Obviously, they're not someone that I'm going to bench. The secondary for the Jets, we'll try to hold them in check, but they're top talents. They're top talents. They're very good players. So I do still see them. Putting up some solid stat lines, give me 5 to 6 catches for both of those guys. Really, that's how I feel about all 3 of them: Landry, OBJ, and Njoku. 5 to 7 catches, 60 to 80 yards. Balancing that out, from the 3 of them, however you want. But I don't see a big amount of space for high ceilings in this game. I still think it's going to be kind of a lower scoring game. For the Jets, you have Darnold out. Oh, I'm sorry, Dearness Johnson. You're going to want to plug him in as well. Hillard and Johnson weren't used a lot, but you'll want to plug in Dearness Johnson into some DFS lineups. Hillard's hurt, so you only have Chubb and Johnson there. So definitely plug him into DFS lineups. He's a sneaky start this week. Good God, sneaky snarks. The Jets. Darnold is out with mono. I'm sure you've all heard. So enter Trevor Siemian. I think that he'll be able to get some work done early in some shorter pass catching routes, but I don't see him playing well this entire game. I think he could throw an interception or 2. You still have Denzel Ward there. Demarius Randall's out, so I think that does bring Jamison Crowder back into play. But really, all I want out of here is some healthy Le'Veon Bell action, and that's it. Just give me Le'Veon Bell. Not trying to start too many guys for the Jets right now. With Darnold out, that's going to limit their options. Anderson's going to get held in check with Denzel Ward. Jamison Crowder is in play with Demarius Randall out. So if you are on the fringe with him or have some other guys that you're not so high on, he could be a guy that gets some usage, but don't expect 17 targets again. Don't expect 13 catches. I do think that he could get 4 to 6 catches, 75 yards maybe if Trevor Siemian can get him on some screen plays or something like that. So over-under for this game, 44 points. Give me the under. I like a lot of defensive play here. I think the Browns defense will play well. I think that the Jets defense will play well. I don't think there's going to be a ton of scoring. And I think that the Browns are really just going to try to keep things simple and bring things back down to earth so that they can kind of game script going forward, not asking Baker to do too much. You got a lot of talent there. Just find the nice, easy, open options and, just roll that way and not try to force things, which I do think that they were trying to do early on last week against the Titans. So I do like the Browns in that game. In the slow kind of beat them out game. The Jets are banged up. You're missing Darnold. I don't trust Trevor Siemian whatsoever. So give me the Browns on the road, but give me the under game total of 44 points. Give me the under there. All right, guys, thanks for stopping back in with me this week for this Week 2 preview. I will be coming out with a Week 2 review this coming week. Sorry for not having a Week 1 review video. I started it up. I talked to the camera for like an hour and a half, and then it recorded 23 minutes of video. So that really sucked. Didn't get to bring that content to you guys, but I will have a Week 2 review coming probably on Tuesday or Wednesday this coming week, and then we'll jump back into the Week 3 preview after that. So really excited about how things are rolling out here. Fantasy is going very well. Had some losses, had some wins, lost some guys to injuries, have made some trades to recover those guys. So really excited about the season going forward so far. Hope everything's going well for you guys. Thanks for stopping back in. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time. Out.